tonight. The boundaries between present and past dissolve like mirages in the Peruvian desert. Feel the air charged with mystery and ancient sand, where each grain holds secrets of a civilization that transformed the earth into a cosmic canvas. If this journey touches your soul, join us again and whisper from where you listen to us. Now dim the lights, breathe deeply. Let us dream with memories that are not our own. I walk barefoot across the vastness of the Nazca desert, where silence runs so deep I can hear echoes of voices that fell silent over 1,000 years ago. The sun sets slowly on the horizon, painting the sand in golden hues that seem to pulse with their own life. Here, in this immensity, stretching over 450 square kilometers, I feel small before the grandeur of what my ancestors created between 200 BC and 650 AD. My feet find the edges of an almost imperceptible line, traced with mathematical precision across the arid landscape. When I crouch down and touch the earth with my palms, I can feel the subtle difference between the stones that were removed and those that have remained untouched for centuries. It's as if each grain of sand holds the memory of the fingers that moved it, of the intentions that guided it to form patterns that can only be understood from the heights of heaven. The wind whispers stories that my soul recognizes, even though my mind cannot fully decipher them. These are not merely lines drawn on the ground. They are messages written in a language that transcends words, a form of communication that connects earth to cosmos, human to divine. Each stroke was thought, planned, executed with a devotion that borders on the sacred.
As night approaches, stars begin to emerge in the desert's clear sky. There is no light pollution here, only the ancestral purity of the celestial dome that my forebears knew so well. Perhaps this is why they chose this place, not only for the natural preservation that the arid climate offers, but for the proximity to infinity that reveals itself each clear night. I sit on a small elevation and observe the shadows that form with the last rays of sun. It is in this magical moment between day and night that the lines seem to take on a life of their own, as if they were pulsing veins of some gigantic organism sleeping beneath the desert's surface. The silence is broken only by the distant sound of wind sculpting dunes and carrying with it fragments of ancient pottery, mute witnesses to a civilization that flourished in this harsh yet sacred landscape. I close my eyes and let imagination transport me to a time when these lands teemed with activity. I can almost hear the murmur of voices planning the next drawings, the rhythmic sound of stones being removed one by one, the ritual songs that accompanied the sacred work of creating art that would last millennia. Each line was an act of faith, a prayer materialized in earth, an eternal dialogue between the terrestrial and celestial. The desert holds its breath around me, as if waiting for something. In this suspended moment, I understand that I am not merely an observer, but a participant in an ancient conversation that began long before my birth and will continue long after my departure. The Nazca people left us more than drawings. They left us questions that dance on the edge of comprehension, mysteries that invite us to look beyond the obvious and seek meaning in the spaces between what we know and what we feel. Standing here in the gathering darkness, I sense the weight of over 700 geoglyphs surrounding me, each one a testament to human persistence and divine inspiration. The largest lines stretch nearly 30 miles across this plateau, while the smallest figures measure just a few meters. Yet size seems irrelevant when confronted by the sheer audacity of the vision, to create art that could only be fully appreciated by gods or birds, to invest generations of labor in something that ground-dwelling humans would never see in its entirety. The temperature drops as night claims the desert, and I pull my cloak tighter around my shoulders. In this chill, I imagine the Nazca workers who labored here centuries ago, their breath visible in the cold morning air as they began another day of sacred construction. They worked without machines, without modern tools, armed only with wooden stakes, ropes, and an unshakable faith in their purpose. What drove them to such extremes of devotion? What visions filled their dreams that compelled them to transform an entire landscape into a canvas for the divine? These questions hover in the air like the spirits of the ancestors themselves, neither demanding answers nor offering easy solutions, but simply existing as eternal mysteries that connect us across the vast expanse of time. The morning sun rises like a golden eye opening over the endless expanse, and I find myself drawn to a place where the earth bears fresh scars from recent discovery. Here, artificial intelligence has revealed 303 new geoglyphs in just 6 months, nearly doubling what archaeologists found over the past century. My hands tremble as I kneel beside one of these newly unveiled secrets, a small figure of a decapitated head, no larger than 7 meters across, yet carrying the weight of millennia in its simple lines. I run my fingers along the shallow depression where ancient hands once worked with methodical precision. The technique seems deceptively simple. Remove the dark, oxidized pebbles from the surface to reveal the lighter clay beneath. Yet as I attempt to understand the process, I realize the profound complexity hidden within this apparent simplicity. Each stone was chosen, each placement deliberate, each removal an act of creation that required not just physical labor, but spiritual commitment. The desert floor here tells a story of patience that modern minds struggle to comprehend. For generations, families would have worked together, passing down not just the techniques, but the sacred knowledge of why these images needed to exist. Children would have learned by watching their elders, understanding that they were not merely moving rocks, but participating in something far greater than themselves. The knowledge was sacred, passed from grandmother to granddaughter, from master craftsman to apprentice, each generation adding their own understanding to the collective wisdom. I imagine the careful planning that preceded each geoglyph. Someone would have climbed the nearby hills, surveying the terrain with eyes trained to see potential where others saw only barren ground. They would have returned to their community with visions of hummingbirds and spiders, of geometric patterns that would align with celestial movements, of human figures that would serve purposes we can only guess at today. These visionaries were part architect, part priest, part astronomer. Individuals who could see the sacred geometry
hidden within the landscape's natural contours. The work itself would have been communal, ritualistic. I can almost hear the chanting that would have accompanied the removal of each stone, the prayers whispered to ensure the gods approved of their earthly canvas. Water would have been precious here, receiving only 20 minutes of rainfall per year, yet they persevered through seasons of drought and abundance alike, their commitment unwavering. The desert demanded sacrifice, and they gave it willingly, understanding that their temporary discomfort served an eternal purpose.
As I trace the outline of a newly discovered cat figure, I'm struck by the intimacy of the moment. My hands follow the same path that Nazca hands followed over 2,000 years ago. The connection transcends time. We are both human, both seeking to understand our place in the cosmos, both using our hands to create meaning from chaos. The cat's eyes seem to stare back at me across the centuries, holding secrets that no amount of archaeological study can fully unlock. The smaller figurative geoglyphs, like the one beneath my palms, were different from the massive geometric lines that stretch for kilometers. These intimate drawings were meant to be walked around, contemplated at human scale. They speak of personal devotion rather than grand ceremony, of individual prayers rather than collective rituals. Perhaps they marked sacred spots where pilgrims would pause during longer journeys along the Great Lines, places where the spiritual seeker could commune with specific deities or ancestral spirits. I notice how the morning light plays across the subtle variations in the desert floor. What appears uniform from a distance reveals itself as a complex tapestry of textures and colors when examined closely. The Nazca people understood this intimately. They knew that their art would be invisible to ground-level observers, yet they created it anyway, suggesting a faith in perspectives beyond the human. They worked for audiences they would never see, for gods whose approval they could only hope to earn. The wind picks up, carrying with it the scent of distant mountains and the whisper of sand against stone. In this sound, I hear the voices of the creators, not as words, but as intentions made manifest in the landscape itself. They were not trying to communicate with us across time. They were communicating with something far more eternal, something that exists in the space between earth and sky, between the known and unknowable. Modern technology has transformed our understanding of this place in ways the ancient Nazca could never have imagined. Drones now soar where only condors once flew, their cameras capturing details that human eyes could never discern from ground level. Artificial intelligence processes thousands of aerial images, identifying patterns that escaped detection for decades. What once took archaeologists years to discover can now be found in days. Yet the fundamental mystery remains unchanged. Technology reveals the what, but the why continues to elude us. The newly discovered geoglyphs include parrots with elaborate tail feathers, cats crouched in hunting positions, monkeys with curled tails, and killer whales wielding ceremonial knives. Each image tells a story, though the language remains largely untranslated. Some figures appear to be engaged in ritual activities. Others seem to represent mythological beings that bridged the gap between the natural and supernatural worlds. The recurring motif of decapitated heads, suggests ritual sacrifice, perhaps offerings to ensure the continuation of life in this harsh environment. I stand and brush the sand from my knees, feeling the grit between my fingers like tiny fragments of time itself. The sun climbs higher, and the shadows that gave definition to the lines begin to fade. Soon, the Nazca lines will become nearly invisible again, blending back into the uniform brown of the desert floor. This daily transformation reminds me that the Nazca lines exist in a constant state of revelation and concealment, appearing and disappearing with the rhythm of light and shadow, like breathing made visible in stone and sand.
From this elevated ridge, I gaze across the vast pampa, where the earth itself becomes a canvas of divine proportions. The morning air is crisp and thin at this altitude, 500 meters above sea level, and my breath forms small clouds that dissipate quickly in the dry atmosphere. Below me stretches an ocean of brown and ochre, punctuated by lines so straight they seem to defy the natural chaos of the landscape. Some extend beyond the horizon, disappearing into heat mirages that dance like spirits at the edge of vision. The Nazca people chose this location with profound wisdom. Here, 50 kilometers inland from Peru's southern coast, the desert tableland provides the perfect conditions for preservation. No rivers flood this plateau. No heavy rains wash away the careful work of human hands. The climate is so arid that what was created here 2 millennia ago remains almost exactly as it was left, a testament to both human ambition and nature's cooperation in preserving the sacred. I follow a narrow path that winds between several geometric patterns, my footsteps careful not to disturb the ancient boundaries. The largest of these designs stretches nearly 30 miles across the desert floor, a feat of engineering that required not just physical labor, but sophisticated planning and coordination. How did they maintain such perfect proportions across such vast distances? The question haunts me as I walk, each step taking me deeper into the mystery. The technique of creation becomes clearer as I examine the edges of various lines. The Nazca workers removed the top layer of reddish-brown, iron oxide-coated pebbles that naturally cover this desert surface. Beneath this dark patina lies lighter-colored clay earth, creating a sharp contrast that makes the designs visible from high heights. The removed stones were carefully piled along the edges of each line, forming low borders that have helped preserve the patterns for centuries.
The spider beneath my feet measures over 40 meters in length, yet from my ground-level perspective, I can barely make out its complete form. I must use my imagination to piece together the full image, relying on memory of aerial photographs to understand what lies before me. This act of mental reconstruction feels like a form of prayer, a reaching toward understanding that mirrors what the original creators must have experienced. As I continue my walk, I encounter other figures emerging from the landscape like memories surfacing from deep sleep. A hummingbird spreads its wings across nearly 100 meters of desert, its beak pointing toward distant mountains. A monkey curls its tail in an eternal spiral frozen in stone and sand. Each creature seems to possess its own personality, its own reason for being, its own message encoded in the language of line and space. The geometric patterns prove even more enigmatic than the animal figures. Straight lines converge and diverge in complex arrangements that suggest mathematical relationships beyond simple decoration. Some researchers believe these patterns served as astronomical calendars, their angles and intersections marking important celestial events. Others see them as pathways for ritual processions,
sacred roads that connected earthly ceremonies to cosmic rhythms. Standing at the intersection of several major lines, I feel the weight of accumulated mystery pressing down like the desert sun. The Nazca civilization flourished here for over 8 centuries, from 100 BC to 800 AD. Yet they left no written records to explain their monumental earthworks. Their pottery depicts many of the same animals and symbols found in the desert lines, suggesting a deep connection between their daily artistic expression and these grand landscape modifications. The silence here is profound, broken only by the whisper of wind across stone and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. In this quietude, I begin to understand that the Nazca lines were never meant to be solved like puzzles or decoded like ancient texts. They exist as pure expression, as manifestations of a worldview that saw no separation between earth and sky, between human creativity and divine inspiration. The sun reaches its zenith, and the shadows that help define the lines begin to shrink and fade. Soon, many of the patterns will become nearly invisible, their subtle depressions lost in the uniform brightness of midday light. This daily cycle of revelation and concealment adds another layer to the mystery. The lines exist in constant dialogue with the sun, appearing and disappearing according to celestial rhythms that the Nazca understood intimately. I find myself thinking about the workers who created these marvels, imagining their daily lives in this harsh but beautiful landscape. They were farmers and fishermen, potters and weavers, people who understood the rhythms of survival in an unforgiving environment. Yet they devoted enormous amounts of time and energy to creating something that served no obvious practical purpose, something that existed primarily in the realm of the sacred and symbolic. Perhaps that is the key to understanding the Nazca lines. They represent humanity's eternal desire to create meaning beyond mere survival, to leave marks upon the world that speak to something greater than individual existence. In transforming this desert into a canvas for the divine, the Nazca people achieved a form of immortality that transcends the physical boundaries of life and death. The afternoon heat shimmers across the desert floor as I make my way toward the ceremonial center of Kawachi, where the spiritual heart of Nazca civilization once pulsed with ritual activity. Here, among the adobe pyramids and earthwork mounds, I can almost hear the echoes of ancient ceremonies that may have given birth to the great lines stretching across the pampa. The sacred city rises from the desert like a mirage made solid, its terraced structures climbing toward the sky in stepped harmony with the surrounding hills. Water was life in this arid realm, and water was the focus of the most profound rituals. The Nazca people lived in a landscape that received barely 20 minutes of rainfall per year, making every drop precious beyond measure. I kneel beside the remnants of an ancient well, its stone-lined walls descending deep into the earth, where underground rivers still flow in hidden channels. The sound of water trickling far below creates a music that must have seemed miraculous to desert dwellers. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Nazca lines were intimately connected to water worship and rain ceremonies. The great geoglyphs may have served as pathways for ritual processions, sacred routes along which priests and pilgrims walked while invoking the gods of sky and storm. I imagine processions of hundreds, perhaps thousands, moving in synchronized patterns across the desert floor,
their footsteps and chants creating a form of prayer that encompassed the entire landscape. The animal figures take on new meaning when viewed through the lens of water worship. The hummingbird, with its ability to hover and dart like falling rain, becomes a messenger between earth and sky. The spider, master of geometric precision in its web-making, mirrors the careful engineering required to channel precious water through irrigation systems. The monkey, agile and adaptable, represents the human ability to survive and thrive in challenging environments through cleverness and cooperation. I follow what appears to be an ancient pathway leading from Kawachi toward one of the major line complexes. The route is marked by small stone cairns and pottery sherds, evidence of countless pilgrims who made this journey over the centuries. Walking this path, I feel connected to a tradition of sacred movement that transformed the act of travel into a form of worship. Each step becomes a prayer, each mile a meditation on the relationship between human need and divine provision. The Nazca people were master agriculturalists who developed sophisticated irrigation systems to support their crops in this challenging environment. They grew maize, squash, sweet potatoes, and cotton, creating oases of green life in the brown desert. Their success depended entirely on their ability to locate, channel, and conserve water from underground sources and seasonal streams flowing down from the distant Andes.
But agriculture alone cannot explain the enormous investment of time and energy required to create the lines. These were not practical constructions designed to improve crop yields or facilitate transportation. They served a higher purpose, one that connected the physical act of survival to the spiritual realm of meaning and transcendence. The lines represent humanity's eternal struggle to find significance beyond mere existence, to create beauty and meaning even in the harshest circumstances. As I walk, I encounter evidence of ritual activity scattered across the desert floor. Pottery fragments decorated with images of mythical beings, textile scraps woven with intricate patterns, and small offerings of shells and feathers left by pilgrims. These artifacts speak of a complex ceremonial life that integrated daily survival with cosmic awareness, practical necessity with spiritual aspiration. The priests who guided these ceremonies would have been individuals of extraordinary knowledge and authority. They needed to understand astronomy to time the rituals correctly, engineering to plan the massive earthworks, psychology to inspire community participation, and theology to interpret the will of the gods. These were the intellectuals and visionaries of their society, people who could see connections between earthly patterns and celestial movements. I pause at a point where several lines converge, creating a natural amphitheater in the desert landscape. Here, the acoustics are remarkable. Sounds carry clearly across great distances, and voices seem to hang in the air longer than physics should allow. This may have been a gathering place for large ceremonies where the entire community could participate in rituals that connected them to the cosmic order represented by the lines themselves. The hallucinogenic San Pedro cactus grows wild in this region, and archaeological evidence suggests it played an important role in Nazca religious practices. Shamans and priests would have used these natural psychoactive substances to induce visions and communicate with the spirit world. Under the influence of such plants, the lines might have seemed to move and dance, the static patterns becoming dynamic expressions of divine energy flowing across the landscape.
Water ceremonies likely followed the agricultural calendar, with major rituals timed to coincide with planting and harvest seasons. The lines may have served as a massive calendar system, their angles and intersections marking important dates in the yearly cycle of survival and renewal. Processions along specific routes could have been timed to coincide with celestial events, creating a form of worship that integrated human activity with cosmic rhythms.
I imagine the sound of hundreds of voices chanting in unison as processions moved along the great lines, their songs carrying across the desert like wind made audible. The ceremonies would have lasted for days, with participants camping along the routes and sharing food, stories, and spiritual experiences. These gatherings would have strengthened community bonds while reinforcing the shared beliefs that made such massive cooperative projects possible. The mystery deepens as I consider the international nature of some ritual elements. Shells from the Pacific coast, feathers from jungle birds, and minerals from mountain regions all appear in Nazca ceremonial contexts. This suggests a network of trade and cultural exchange that brought exotic materials to the desert for use in water ceremonies and line-related rituals. The Nazca lines were not created in isolation, but as part of a broader Andean tradition of landscape modification and sacred geography. As the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, the lines start to emerge from the uniform brightness of midday, their shadows growing longer and more defined. This daily transformation reminds me that the Nazca people lived in constant awareness of celestial cycles, their entire worldview shaped by the movement of sun, moon, and stars across the desert sky.
The evening light transforms the desert into a tapestry of gold and amber as I make my way to the workshops where Nazca artisans once created the vibrant ceramics that mirror the great lines etched in the earth. Here, among the scattered remains of kilns and pottery shards, I can almost feel the presence of the master craftsmen who translated cosmic visions into clay and pigment. Their hands shaped vessels that told the same stories written in stone across the pampa, creating a dialogue between the intimate and the infinite. I pick up a fragment of polychrome pottery, its surface decorated with a stylized hummingbird identical to the great geoglyph that spreads its wings across nearly 100 meters of desert floor. The colors remain vivid after centuries. Brilliant reds, deep yellows, rich browns, and stark whites that seem to glow in the fading light. The small shard connects me to an artist who lived and worked here over 1,000 years ago. Someone who understood that the same sacred symbols belonged both in the palm of the hand and spread across the landscape. The Nazca potters were masters of their craft, creating vessels with a technique they called horror vacui, the fear of empty space. Every surface was decorated, every inch covered with intricate designs that wove together the natural and supernatural worlds. Birds, fish, plants, and mythological beings danced across the curved surfaces of bottles, bowls, and ceremonial vessels, creating portable galleries of sacred art that could be carried into the desert for ritual use. These masterpieces served as more than mere containers. They were teaching tools, storytelling devices, and spiritual guides that helped preserve and transmit the complex mythology underlying the great lines. A priest carrying a decorated water vessel during a ceremony would have been transporting not just liquid, but liquid meaning, the physical substance made sacred by the symbolic context provided by the artwork adorning its surface. I imagine the workshops bustling with activity during the height of Nazca civilization. Master potters would have worked alongside apprentices, passing down techniques and symbolic knowledge through generations of careful instruction. The clay came from specific locations, chosen for its quality and spiritual significance. The pigments were derived from minerals found throughout the region: iron oxides for reds and yellows, manganese for purples and blacks, kaolin for whites that gleamed like moonlight. The process of creation itself was a form of ritual. Clay had to be prepared through careful mixing and aging, pigments ground to perfect consistency, fires tended with precise attention to temperature and timing. Each step required not just technical skill, but spiritual awareness, an understanding that the potter was participating in an act of creation that echoed the divine formation of the world itself.
Walking among the workshop ruins, I notice how the pottery fragments seem to map the same symbolic territory as the Great Lines. Here is a spider, identical to the one etched in the desert floor. There, a monkey with the same curled tail. Beyond that, a killer whale wielding the same ceremonial knife. The consistency of imagery across different media suggests a unified symbolic system, a coherent worldview that found expression in everything from monumental earthworks to intimate drinking vessels. The textiles produced by Nazca weavers tell similar stories, their intricate patterns echoing the geometric designs found among the desert lines. I examine fragments of cotton and wool cloth, marveling at the complexity of the weaving techniques and the sophistication of the dye processes. These fabrics would have been worn during ceremonies, their patterns serving as wearable prayers that connected the human body to the cosmic order represented by the great geoglyphs. Color held profound meaning in Nazca culture, each hue carrying specific symbolic associations that linked earthly materials to celestial forces. Red represented blood and life force. Yellow symbolized the sun and divine energy. White evoked purity and spiritual transcendence. Black suggested the fertile darkness of earth and the mystery of death. When these colors appeared together in pottery or textiles, they created visual prayers that invoked the full spectrum of cosmic power. The workshops were not isolated from the Great Lines, but intimately connected to them through networks of meaning and purpose. Pottery created here would have been carried along the sacred pathways during ceremonies, its symbolic content activated by its presence in the ritual landscape. The act of creation in the workshop and the act of worship on the lines were part of a single, integrated spiritual practice that encompassed all aspects of Nazca life. I find evidence of specialized tools used in pottery production: bone-burnishing implements, stone-grinding pallets, wooden modeling tools worn smooth by countless hands. These simple instruments were the means by which cosmic visions were translated into physical form, the bridge between inspiration and manifestation. Each tool carries the memory of its use, the accumulated knowledge of generations of artisans who understood their craft as a sacred calling. The kilns themselves were marvels of engineering, designed to achieve the high temperatures necessary for creating the brilliant colors that characterize Nazca ceramics. The firing process was both technical challenge and spiritual ordeal, requiring precise control of heat and atmosphere while maintaining the proper ritual attitude. Successful firing was seen as a sign of divine approval, while failures were interpreted as messages requiring spiritual adjustment.
As darkness approaches, I light a small fire using dried wood found among the ruins. The flames dance and flicker, casting moving shadows that bring the pottery fragments to life. In this flickering light, the painted figures seem to move and breathe, the static images becoming dynamic expressions of the same life force that animated the great ceremonies along the desert lines. The connection between pottery and lines extends beyond mere symbolic correspondence to encompass practical function as well. Ceramic vessels were essential equipment for the long pilgrimages along the sacred pathways, providing means to carry water, food, and ritual substances across the waterless expanses. The decoration of these vessels transformed utilitarian objects into sacred implements, making every meal and every drink an act of communion with the divine. Sitting by my fire among the ancient workshops, I understand that the Nazca lines cannot be separated from the broader cultural context that produced them. They were not isolated monuments, but integral parts of a comprehensive worldview that found expression in every aspect of daily life. The same hands that shaped clay into vessels also moved stones to create the great geoglyphs. The same eyes that painted hummingbirds on pottery also envisioned them spread across the desert floor. The mystery of the lines is inseparable from the mystery of the culture that created them, a civilization that saw no distinction between art and worship, between practical necessity and spiritual expression, between the intimate scale of human hands and the cosmic scale of divine purpose.
The stars emerge one by one in the crystalline desert sky, and I find myself lying on my back in the center of a great geometric pattern, gazing upward into the cosmic vault that the Nazca people knew with intimate precision. Here, far from any source of artificial light, the Milky Way stretches across the heavens like a river of luminous sand, its brightness so intense that I can read the landscape by starlight alone. This is the same sky that guided the ancient astronomers, who may have encoded celestial knowledge into the very lines beneath my body. The Southern Cross hangs low on the horizon, its distinctive pattern serving as a celestial compass that has guided travelers for millennia. The Nazca people would have known this constellation as intimately as they knew the pathways through their own desert, using its position to mark the changing seasons and time their agricultural activities. I trace its outline with my finger, connecting the dots of light just as the ancient line builders connected points on the earth to create their massive geometric forms. Archaeological evidence suggests that many of the Nazca lines align with significant astronomical events, the winter and summer solstices, the rising and setting of important star groups, the phases of the moon. Some researchers believe the entire complex functioned as a massive astronomical calendar, its angles and intersections marking crucial dates in the yearly cycle of planting, harvesting, and ceremony. The precision required for such alignments speaks to a sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics that rivals modern astronomical knowledge. I shift my position to align myself with one of the major lines, my body becoming part of the geometric pattern as I point toward a specific star cluster. From this perspective, I begin to understand how the lines might have served as teaching tools, allowing astronomers to demonstrate celestial relationships to students and community members. The desert floor becomes a three-dimensional textbook, its lessons written in stone and sand rather than ink and paper. The concept of time held different meaning for the Nazca people than it does for us. They lived in cyclical time, where past, present, and future flowed together like the underground rivers that sustained their civilization. The stars returned to the same positions year after year. The seasons followed their eternal rhythm,
and the ceremonies repeated in endless cycles that connected each generation to those who came before and those yet to come.
Maria Riesch, the German mathematician who devoted her life to studying the Nazca lines, believed she had discovered astronomical alignments that proved the geoglyphs functioned as a giant calendar. She spent decades mapping the lines with surveying equipment, calculating angles and measuring distances with obsessive precision. Her work revealed mathematical relationships that seemed too complex to be accidental, suggesting deliberate astronomical planning behind the seemingly random arrangement of lines and figures. Yet other researchers have challenged the astronomical interpretation, arguing that the alignments Riesch discovered could be explained by chance rather than design. The debate continues, but lying here under the star-filled sky, I feel the pull of celestial explanation. The night sky is so overwhelming in its beauty and complexity that it seems natural for an ancient people to want to mirror its patterns on the earth below. The Nazca understanding of astronomy was deeply integrated with their religious beliefs and agricultural practices. The appearance of certain star groups signaled the time for planting crops, while other celestial events marked the beginning of harvest season or the proper timing for water ceremonies. The lines may have served as a way to make these abstract astronomical relationships concrete and visible, transforming the entire desert into a teaching tool for cosmic knowledge. I imagine groups of students gathering at specific points along the lines during important astronomical events, their teachers using the earthbound patterns to explain the movements of celestial bodies. The experience would have been profoundly educational, combining physical movement through the landscape with intellectual understanding of cosmic principles. Learning became a full-body experience that engaged all the senses and created lasting memories. The southern hemisphere sky, visible from Nazca, contains constellations and star patterns unknown to northern hemisphere observers. The Coal-Sack Nebula, a dark cloud of cosmic dust that appears as a black patch in the Milky Way, was particularly significant to Andean peoples who saw it as a cosmic llama grazing in the celestial pastures. The Nazca lines include several llama figures, suggesting a connection between earthbound and skybound versions of this important animal. As the night deepens, more stars become visible, their light growing stronger as my eyes adapt to the darkness. The desert silence is so complete that I can hear my own heartbeat, a rhythm that seems to synchronize with the slow rotation of the earth beneath the wheeling stars. This is the same silence that surrounded the ancient astronomers as they made their observations and calculations, the same darkness that revealed the celestial patterns they sought to understand and replicate.
The Pleiades star cluster, known to the Nazca as a group of dancing sisters, rises in the east like a handful of diamonds scattered across black velvet. This constellation was particularly important for timing agricultural activities, its position in the sky indicating the proper moment for various farming tasks. The appearance of the Pleiades at dawn marked the beginning of the planting season, while its evening visibility signaled harvest time. I roll onto my side and examine the horizon, noting how the surrounding mountains create a natural observatory with clear sight lines to important astronomical events. The Nazca chose this location not only for its preservation qualities, but also for its excellent visibility of the night sky. The high altitude and dry climate create ideal conditions for astronomical observation, with minimal atmospheric distortion and virtually no cloud cover for most of the year. The moon rises late, its silver light gradually washing out the fainter stars, but revealing new details in the landscape around me. The lines become more visible in moonlight, their subtle depressions catching and holding the pale illumination. This transformation suggests another layer of meaning. The geoglyphs were designed to be experienced under different lighting conditions, their appearance changing with the phases of the moon and the position of the sun. Ancient astronomers would have spent countless nights in locations like this, mapping the movements of celestial bodies and discovering the mathematical relationships that govern their behavior. Their knowledge was both practical and sacred, serving the immediate needs of agricultural timing while also providing insight into the cosmic order that governed all existence. The lines represent the culmination of this astronomical tradition, a permanent record of celestial knowledge written in the most durable medium available, the earth itself.
Dawn breaks across the pampa like a slow revelation, and I find myself walking along what appears to be an ancient trade route that connects the Nazca lines to distant settlements scattered across the Andean landscape. My feet follow paths worn smooth by countless travelers who carried exotic goods, sacred knowledge, and cultural innovations across the vast distances that separated one oasis of civilization from another. These were the highways of the ancient world, invisible to casual observation, but clearly marked for those who knew how to read the subtle signs left by generations of pilgrims and merchants. The morning air carries scents that speak of distant places, salt from the Pacific coast, exotic spices from jungle regions, metallic traces of minerals from high mountain mines. These aromas remind me that the Nazca lines were not created in isolation, but as part of a vast network of cultural exchange that connected the desert people to civilizations throughout the Andes and beyond. The great geoglyphs served as landmarks for travelers, their massive scale making them visible from great distances to anyone approaching across the open pampa. I pause beside a cluster of stone cairns that mark an ancient camping spot, their arrangement suggesting a place where caravans regularly stopped to rest and resupply. Scattered around the stones are pottery fragments from different regions, evidence of the cultural mixing that occurred at such waypoints. Here, a shard decorated in classic Nazca style lies beside another bearing the distinctive patterns of highland peoples, while a third shows coastal influences in its marine motifs and shell-tempered clay. The trade routes that passed through Nazca territory carried more than material goods. They were conduits for the exchange of ideas, technologies, and spiritual practices that enriched all the cultures they connected. Pilgrims traveling to visit the Great Lines would have brought their own religious traditions and astronomical knowledge, contributing to the complex synthesis of beliefs that ultimately found expression in the desert geoglyphs. Following the ancient pathway, I encounter evidence of the sophisticated logistics required to support long-distance travel in this harsh environment. Stone-lined wells mark reliable water sources, while carefully constructed shelters provide protection from sandstorms and extreme temperatures. The infrastructure of ancient travel was built to last, designed by people who understood that the survival of their civilization depended on maintaining connections with the wider world.
The llamas that served as pack animals for these ancient caravans left their own marks on the landscape, worn trails that wind between obstacles, grazing areas marked by scattered dung that still fertilizes hardy desert plants, and rubbing stones polished smooth by countless woolly bodies seeking relief from parasites. These humble traces of animal presence remind me that the grand spiritual purposes of the lines coexisted with the practical necessities of daily survival and economic exchange. I imagined the excitement that must have filled travelers as they approached the Nazca region, knowing they were entering a landscape transformed by human vision into something approaching the divine. The first glimpse of the great lines stretching across the horizon would have been a moment of profound spiritual impact, confirmation that they had reached a place where the boundary between earth and heaven had been deliberately blurred. The merchants who traveled these routes were more than simple traders. They were cultural ambassadors who carried news, stories, and innovations from one region to another. A textile merchant from the coast might bring new weaving techniques, along with exotic shells and dried fish, while a highland trader could offer metal tools and astronomical knowledge in exchange for desert-grown cotton and ceremonial pottery. Some of the most intriguing artifacts found along these ancient routes are small stone markers carved with symbols that seem to reference the great lines themselves. These portable representations of the geoglyphs may have served as maps or guidebooks for travelers, helping them navigate the complex network of pathways that crisscrossed the desert. The symbols are stylized but recognizable, simplified versions of the spider, hummingbird, and monkey figures that dominate the landscape. The seasonal nature of ancient trade is evident in the archaeological record, with certain routes showing heavy use during specific times of year, while remaining virtually abandoned during others. This pattern suggests that travel was carefully timed to coincide with favorable weather conditions, agricultural cycles, and ceremonial calendars. The great gatherings at Nazca may have been scheduled to coincide with major trading seasons, creating festivals that combined spiritual observance with economic exchange. As I walk, I notice how the ancient pathways often follow the most efficient routes across the landscape, taking advantage of natural features to minimize travel time and energy expenditure. The route planners who established these trails possessed intimate knowledge of desert conditions, understanding how to find water, avoid dangerous terrain, and take advantage of prevailing winds. Their expertise was passed down through generations of guides who made their living leading caravans safely across the trackless wastes.
The cultural impact of these trade networks extended far beyond simple economic exchange. Ideas about art, religion, astronomy, and social organization flowed along the routes just as freely as material goods, creating a dynamic synthesis of traditions that enriched all participating cultures. The Nazca lines themselves may represent the culmination of this cultural mixing, incorporating influences from coastal, highland, and jungle civilizations into a unique expression of Andean spirituality. I find myself thinking about the courage required to undertake such journeys in ancient times, when travel meant weeks or months of difficult passage through dangerous terrain with no guarantee of safe arrival. The traders and pilgrims who used these routes were adventurers in the truest sense, individuals willing to risk everything for the promise of profit, knowledge or spiritual fulfillment that lay at journey's end. The decline of the Nazca civilization coincided with changes in these ancient trade patterns, as political upheavals and climate shifts disrupted the networks that had sustained cultural exchange for centuries. The Great Lines remained, but the human activity that gave them meaning gradually diminished, leaving behind only the mysterious patterns that continue to puzzle observers today. Standing at a high point where several ancient routes converge, I can see how the Nazca lines served as a focal point for this vast network of human movement. The geoglyphs were not isolated monuments, but integral parts of a living landscape where spiritual pilgrimage, economic exchange, and cultural innovation intersected in ways that transformed the desert into one of the most significant ceremonial centers in the ancient Americas.
The midday sun beats down mercilessly as I approach the heart of the animal kingdom, etched into the desert floor, where mythical beasts and sacred creatures dance in eternal stillness across the burning sand. Here, the Nazca people transformed their deepest spiritual beliefs into living symbols, each animal figure serving as a bridge between the physical world of survival and the metaphysical realm of meaning. The creatures that surround me are more than mere representations. They are embodiments of divine forces, each one carrying specific powers and messages that spoke directly to the souls of their creators. I stand at the edge of the great spider, its body stretching 46 meters across the desert floor, its legs extending in perfect symmetry toward the 8 directions of the compass. In Nazca mythology, the spider was a master weaver, its web representing the interconnected nature of all existence. The precision required to create this figure mirrors the mathematical perfection found in actual spiderwebs, suggesting that the ancient artists understood geometry not as abstract theory, but as a fundamental principle governing both natural and supernatural worlds. The spider's association with water makes it particularly significant in this arid landscape. Spiders are among the first creatures to sense approaching rain, their webs collecting moisture from the air long before clouds become visible on the horizon. For a desert people whose survival depended entirely on their ability to predict and locate water sources, the spider became a powerful symbol of prophetic knowledge and life-sustaining wisdom. Moving across the pampa, I encounter the magnificent hummingbird, its wings spread across 93 meters of carefully cleared ground. The hummingbird holds special meaning in Andean cultures as a messenger between worlds, its ability to hover motionless in the air, suggesting mastery over the forces of gravity and time. The Nazca version captures this sense of suspended animation, the bird frozen in eternal flight between earth and sky, its needle-like beak pointed toward distant mountains where the gods were believed to dwell. The hummingbird's connection to flowers and nectar made it a symbol of fertility and renewal, qualities desperately needed in a landscape where life clung precariously to existence. During ceremonies, priests may have invoked the hummingbird's power to bring sweetness to bitter circumstances, to find sustenance in the most unlikely places, and to maintain hope even in the face of seemingly impossible challenges. The killer whale emerges from the desert like a vision from another world, its massive form stretching across the sand in defiance of its oceanic origins. This creature, known to the Nazca through trade contacts with coastal peoples, represented the ultimate predator, intelligent, powerful, and utterly without fear. The whale's presence in the desert speaks to the Nazca understanding that spiritual power transcends physical boundaries, that the forces governing the ocean depths could be invoked even in the heart of the driest landscape on Earth. Archaeological evidence suggests that killer whale imagery was associated with ritual sacrifice and the taking of trophy heads, practices that may have been necessary to maintain cosmic balance in Nazca religious thinking. The whale's role as apex predator made it an appropriate symbol for the life and death struggles that characterized existence in the desert, where survival often required difficult choices and ultimate sacrifices. I find myself drawn to the monkey figure, its tail curled in a perfect spiral that seems to contain infinite mathematical relationships. Monkeys were not native to the Nazca region, but they appeared frequently in the art and mythology of jungle peoples with whom the desert dwellers maintained trade relationships. The monkey's intelligence and adaptability made it a symbol of human ingenuity, while its playful nature suggested that even in the most serious spiritual matters there was room for joy and celebration. The spiral of the monkey's tail connects it to broader Andean concepts of cyclical time and eternal return. The spiral appears throughout Nazca art as a symbol of life's continuous renewal, the endless cycle of death and rebirth that governs both individual existence and cosmic order. Walking around the monkey figure, I feel myself drawn into this spiral pattern, my movement becoming part of the eternal dance between creation and destruction. The condor soars across the desert in magnificent isolation, its wings spanning over 100 meters of sacred ground. As the largest flying bird in the Americas, the condor was revered throughout the Andes as a messenger of the gods, capable of carrying prayers from earth to heaven and bringing divine responses back to human supplicants. The Nazca condor captures this sense of cosmic communication, its outstretched wings suggesting both earthly majesty and celestial connection. Condors are scavengers, feeding on the remains of dead animals, and this association with death made them important figures in Nazca funeral practices and ancestor worship. The great bird's ability to transform death into life, to find sustenance in decay, spoke to fundamental truths about existence in a harsh environment where nothing could be wasted and every ending contained the seeds of new beginning.
Each animal figure tells its own story, but together they form a complex narrative about the relationship between human consciousness and natural forces. The Nazca people did not see themselves as separate from the animal kingdom, but as participants in a larger community of beings, each species contributing its own wisdom to the collective understanding of how to live in harmony with cosmic principles. The placement of the animal figures across the landscape follow patterns that suggest astronomical alignments and seasonal significance. Certain creatures appear to be oriented toward specific star groups or celestial events, while others seem positioned to catch the first light of dawn or the last rays of sunset. This integration of animal symbolism with astronomical knowledge created a comprehensive system of meaning that encompassed both earthly and heavenly wisdom. As I move among these ancient creatures, I begin to understand that they represent more than artistic achievement or religious expression. They embody a complete philosophy of existence that saw no separation between matter and spirit, between human aspiration and natural law.
The animals of Nazca are teachers whose lessons remain as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago, reminding us that true wisdom comes from understanding our place within the larger web of existence that connects all living beings.
The sound of distant rotors breaks the ancient silence as I witness the marriage of cutting-edge technology with timeless mystery. Above me, drones equipped with high-resolution cameras sweep across the desert in precise patterns, their mechanical eyes capturing details that human vision could never discern from ground level. This is the new age of archaeological discovery, where artificial intelligence processes thousands of aerial images in hours, revealing secrets that lay hidden for decades beneath the seemingly uniform surface of the pampa. I watch from a small observation platform as researchers from Japan's Yamagata University demonstrate their revolutionary approach to geoglyph detection. Their AI system, developed in collaboration with IBM, has already identified 303 previously unknown figures in just 6 months, nearly doubling the number of known Nazca geoglyphs discovered over the past century. The speed of discovery is breathtaking, yet it raises profound questions about what else might be waiting beneath the sand, invisible to traditional archaeological methods. The newly discovered figures are smaller than the famous giant geoglyphs, measuring between 3 and 7 meters across, which explains why they escaped detection during decades of aerial surveys. These intimate drawings include parrots with elaborate tail feathers, cats crouched in hunting positions, llamas in ceremonial poses, and human figures engaged in ritual activities. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of Nazca civilization, revealing new layers of complexity in their symbolic system. Dr. Masato Sakai, the lead researcher, explains how machine learning algorithms can identify subtle patterns in satellite imagery that human eyes would miss. The AI system has been trained to recognize the characteristic signatures of geoglyphs, the slight color variations and geometric regularities that distinguish intentional human modifications from natural landscape features. What once required years of painstaking ground surveys can now be accomplished in days, revolutionizing our understanding of the scope and complexity of Nazca achievements. Yet technology alone cannot unlock the deeper mysteries of purpose and meaning that surround these ancient creations. The AI can tell us where the lines are and what they depict, but it cannot explain why the Nazca people invested such enormous effort in creating art that could only be fully appreciated from impossible perspectives. The fundamental questions that have puzzled researchers for decades remain as enigmatic as ever, perhaps even more so now that we know the true extent of the Nazca achievement.
I examine high-resolution photographs of the newly discovered geoglyphs, marveling at the precision and artistry revealed by modern imaging technology. A small bird figure shows individual feather details that would be invisible to ground-level observers, while a human figure displays elaborate headdress decorations that mirror designs found on Nazca pottery. The consistency of artistic style across different scales and time periods suggests a remarkably stable cultural tradition that maintained its symbolic vocabulary for centuries. The integration of traditional archaeological methods with advanced technology creates new possibilities for understanding ancient cultures. Ground-penetrating radar reveals subsurface features that complement the aerial discoveries, while chemical analysis of soil samples provides insights into the construction techniques used to create the geoglyphs. Laser scanning creates three-dimensional models that allow researchers to study the lines from any angle, revealing subtle details that would be impossible to observe in person. Climate change and human encroachment pose increasing threats to the preservation of the Nazca lines, making rapid documentation more urgent than ever.
The AI-assisted surveys provide a comprehensive baseline for monitoring changes over time, while also identifying previously unknown geoglyphs that may be at risk from development or natural erosion. Technology becomes a tool for preservation as well as discovery, helping to protect these irreplaceable cultural treasures for future generations. The democratization of aerial imagery through satellite technology and drone photography has opened new avenues for citizen science participation in archaeological research. Amateur enthusiasts can now contribute to the discovery process by examining publicly available satellite images and reporting potential geoglyphs to professional researchers. This collaborative approach harnesses the power of crowdsourcing while maintaining scientific rigor in the verification and documentation of new finds. I observe a team of graduate students learning to operate the latest survey equipment, their enthusiasm tempered by awareness of the responsibility they bear as guardians of ancient knowledge. They represent a new generation of archaeologists who must balance technological capability with cultural sensitivity, ensuring that the rush to discover and document does not overshadow the need to understand and respect the spiritual significance of these sacred sites.
The economic implications of technological discovery are significant, as each new geoglyph adds to the cultural heritage value of the region and its potential for sustainable tourism development. However, increased visibility also brings increased vulnerability, as more visitors mean greater risk of damage to the fragile desert environment. The challenge lies in sharing these remarkable discoveries with the world while protecting them from the unintended consequences of their own fame. Virtual reality technology now allows people around the world to experience the Nazca lines without physically visiting the site, reducing environmental impact while expanding educational access. These digital reconstructions can show the geoglyphs from multiple perspectives and time periods, helping viewers understand how they would have appeared to their creators and how they have changed over the centuries. The philosophical implications of AI-assisted discovery extend beyond archaeology to fundamental questions about the nature of knowledge and understanding. Can artificial intelligence truly comprehend the cultural significance of what it discovers, or does it merely identify patterns without grasping their deeper meaning? The tension between technological capability and human wisdom becomes particularly acute when dealing with sacred sites that embody spiritual beliefs and practices we may never fully understand. As the sun sets over the Pampa, painting the ancient lines in shades of gold and crimson, I reflect on the strange convergence of ancient mystery and modern technology that defines contemporary Nazca research. The same desert that witnessed the creation of these enigmatic geoglyphs now hosts some of the most advanced archaeological technology ever deployed, yet the fundamental questions remain as compelling as ever. Perhaps that is as it should be. Some mysteries are meant to inspire rather than to be solved, to remind us that human achievement transcends the merely practical and reaches towards something eternal and inexplicable.
The afternoon heat creates shimmering mirages that dance across the desert floor, and in these wavering illusions I glimpse the eternal nature of the mysteries that surround me. Perhaps the Nazca lines were never meant to be solved like mathematical equations or decoded like ancient scripts. Perhaps their true purpose lies not in any single explanation, but in their ability to generate wonder, to provoke questions that lead us deeper into contemplation of our own relationship with the cosmos and the divine. Standing at the intersection of several major lines, I feel the weight of accumulated theories that have been proposed over the decades, astronomical calendar, irrigation map, ritual pathway, alien landing strip, sacred geography, water worship site. Each explanation captures some aspect of the truth while failing to encompass the whole. The lines resist simple categorization, existing in a realm beyond ordinary understanding where multiple meanings coexist without contradiction. The very persistence of the mystery speaks to something profound about human nature and our need for the inexplicable. In an age when technology promises to unlock every secret and answer every question, the Nazca lines remain stubbornly enigmatic, reminding us that some aspects of human experience transcend rational analysis. They exist as monuments to the unknowable, testaments to the power of mystery to inspire and transform. I walk slowly along a geometric pattern that extends beyond the horizon, my footsteps marking a rhythm that seems to echo across the centuries. Each step connects me to the countless pilgrims who have made this same journey, seeking answers that may not exist in any conventional sense. The lines become a meditation on the nature of seeking itself, a physical manifestation of humanity's eternal quest for meaning and transcendence. The silence here is so complete that it seems to have substance, pressing against my consciousness like a living presence. In this profound quietude, I begin to understand that the Nazca lines function as a form of prayer made visible, a conversation with the infinite that requires no words and expects no reply. They exist in the space between question and answer, between human aspiration and divine mystery. The mathematical precision of the geoglyphs suggests knowledge and planning, yet their ultimate purpose remains elusive. This paradox reflects a fundamental truth about human creativity. Our greatest achievements often emerge from impulses we cannot fully explain or justify. The Nazca people created something that transcended their immediate needs and circumstances, reaching toward a form of expression that speaks to universal human longings.
The interplay of light and shadow across the lines changes constantly throughout the day, creating an ever-shifting display that reveals new patterns and relationships. What appears as a simple straight line at noon becomes a complex interplay of depth and dimension at sunrise or sunset. This temporal quality suggests that the lines were designed to be experienced over time, their meaning unfolding gradually through patient observation and contemplation. I find myself thinking about the nature of legacy and what we leave behind for future generations to discover and interpret. The Nazca people could not have imagined that their desert drawings would one day be studied by artificial intelligence or photographed from space. Yet they created something durable enough to survive and inspire across millennia. Their achievement transcends its original context, speaking to concerns and aspirations that remain relevant today. The tourist infrastructure that has grown up around the lines creates its own layer of meaning and interpretation. Viewing platforms, flight services, and interpretive centers all represent attempts to make the mystery accessible while preserving its essential character. Yet something is inevitably lost in translation, as the immediate experience of standing alone in the desert gives way to mediated encounters filtered through commercial and educational frameworks. The academic debates surrounding the lines reflect broader tensions within archaeology and anthropology about the nature of knowledge and interpretation. How do we balance scientific rigor with respect for indigenous worldviews,
How do we avoid imposing our own cultural assumptions on ancient peoples whose thought processes may have been fundamentally different from our own? The Nazca lines force us to confront the limitations of our analytical frameworks and the possibility that some forms of human expression exist beyond the reach of conventional scholarship. Climate change poses new threats to the preservation of the lines, as changing weather patterns brings unprecedented rainfall and wind erosion to the desert. The irony is profound. The same arid conditions that preserved these ancient creations for 2 millennia may be changing in ways that threaten their continued existence. The mystery of their purpose may be joined by the tragedy of their loss, adding urgency to efforts to document and understand them while they still exist. The global fascination with the Nazca lines reflects something deeper than mere curiosity about ancient civilizations. They represent a form of human achievement that challenges our assumptions about progress and development, suggesting that our ancestors possessed forms of knowledge and capability that we have lost or forgotten. In an age of rapid technological change, they remind us that wisdom and wonder are not necessarily products of scientific advancement.
The lines exist in a state of perpetual becoming, their meaning constantly evolving as new discoveries are made and new interpretations proposed. Each generation brings its own questions and perspectives to bear on these ancient creations, finding in them reflections of contemporary concerns and aspirations. They serve as mirrors that reveal as much about the observers as about the observed, reflecting our own deepest questions about purpose, meaning, and transcendence. As the day progresses toward evening, the quality of light begins to change, and the lines start to emerge from the uniform brightness of midday into the dramatic contrasts of approaching sunset. This daily transformation reminds me that mystery itself is not static, but dynamic, revealing different aspects of itself under different conditions. The Nazca lines teach us that some truths can only be glimpsed obliquely, in moments of transition when ordinary perception gives way to something deeper and more profound. Perhaps the greatest mystery of the Nazca lines is not why they were created, but why they continue to captivate us, why they retain their power to inspire wonder and provoke questions after all these centuries. In their persistence and in their resistance to easy explanation, they remind us that the most important aspects of human experience often lie beyond the reach of rational analysis, in realms where mystery and meaning converge in ways that transform understanding into wisdom. The evening shadows grow longer as I take my place among the silent guardians of this sacred landscape, feeling the weight of responsibility that comes with witnessing something so profound and fragile. Here, where the desert wind carries whispers of ancient prayers, I understand that preservation is more than protection. It is an act of devotion that connects the present moment to an eternal conversation between human aspiration and divine mystery. The threats facing the Nazca lines are both ancient and modern, natural and human-made. Flash floods, though rare in this arid climate, can cause devastating damage when they occur, washing away centuries of careful preservation in a matter of hours. The delicate balance that has protected these geoglyphs for 2 millennia depends on climatic conditions that may be changing in ways we cannot predict or control.
I walk carefully along the edges of the protected areas, noting the subtle markers that delineate the boundaries between the sacred and the mundane. These invisible lines carry as much significance as the visible ones etched in the desert floor, representing humanity's attempt to create zones of reverence in a world increasingly dominated by commercial and utilitarian concerns. The act of preservation becomes a form of prayer, a commitment to maintaining spaces where mystery can flourish. The local communities who live near the lines carry the burden of guardianship in their daily lives, balancing economic needs with cultural responsibility. Tourism brings necessary income, but also poses risks to the fragile desert environment. Each visitor represents both an opportunity to share the wonder of the lines and a potential threat to their continued existence. The guardians must navigate this delicate balance with wisdom and patience. I meet an elderly man whose family has lived in the region for generations, his weathered hands gesturing toward the horizon as he speaks of his ancestors' connection to the sacred patterns. His knowledge comes not from books or academic study, but from a lifetime of living in intimate relationship with the landscape. He understands the lines not as archaeological artifacts, but as living expressions of spiritual truth that continue to influence daily life.
Modern conservation efforts employ sophisticated monitoring systems to track changes in the lines over time. Satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and chemical analyses provide detailed information about the current condition of the geoglyphs and help predict future threats. Yet all this technology cannot replace the human element of care and attention that true preservation requires. The psychological impact of serving as a guardian of such ancient mysteries is profound and often overlooked. Those who dedicate their lives to protecting the lines carry the weight of responsibility for preserving something irreplaceable for future generations. The knowledge that a moment's carelessness could destroy what has survived for centuries creates a constant awareness of the fragility of cultural heritage. I observe the daily rituals of the conservation team as they conduct their rounds, checking for signs of damage or unauthorized access. Their work is largely invisible to visitors, but it represents the foundation upon which all other activities depend. Without their vigilant care, the lines would quickly succumb to the various forces that threaten their existence. The legal frameworks that protect the lines reflect evolving understanding of cultural heritage and its significance for humanity as a whole. UNESCO World Heritage designation brings international recognition and support, but it also creates new challenges as global attention increases pressure on local resources and infrastructure. Protection becomes a complex negotiation between local needs and international expectations. Educational programs designed to raise awareness about the lines and their significance face the challenge of conveying complex cultural and historical information to diverse audiences. How do you explain the importance of preserving something whose purpose remains mysterious? How do you inspire reverence for achievements that challenge conventional understanding of ancient capabilities? The role of technology in preservation extends beyond monitoring and documentation to include virtual reality experiences that allow people to explore the lines without physically visiting the site. These digital alternatives may help reduce environmental impact while expanding access to educational opportunities. Yet they also raise questions about the relationship between authentic experience and technological simulation.
Climate change represents perhaps the greatest long-term threat to the preservation of the lines, as shifting weather patterns could fundamentally alter the conditions that have protected them for millennia. Rising temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, and increased frequency of extreme weather events all pose risks that cannot be easily mitigated through traditional conservation methods.
The economic dimensions of preservation create complex ethical dilemmas about the commodification of cultural heritage. Tourism revenue supports conservation efforts and provides livelihoods for local communities, but it also transforms sacred sites into commercial attractions. Finding the balance between accessibility and protection requires constant vigilance and adaptation. I spend time in quiet contemplation at one of the viewing platforms, watching as the last tour groups of the day depart and silence returns to the desert. In these moments of solitude, I feel most acutely the responsibility that comes with witnessing something so extraordinary. The lines exist not just as historical artifacts, but as ongoing challenges to our understanding of human potential and purpose. The international community of researchers, conservators, and cultural heritage professionals who work to protect the lines represents a form of global guardianship that transcends national boundaries and cultural differences. Their collaboration demonstrates humanity's capacity to unite around shared values of preservation and respect for ancient wisdom. As darkness approaches, I light a small candle in recognition of all those who have served as guardians of these sacred patterns throughout the centuries. The flame flickers in the desert wind, a tiny point of light in the vast darkness, yet somehow adequate to honor the enormous responsibility of protecting something that connects us to the deepest mysteries of human existence. The act of guardianship transforms those who undertake it, creating bonds of connection that extend across time and space to encompass all who have ever stood in wonder before these ancient creations. We become part of the story, temporary custodians of something eternal, charged with ensuring that future generations will have the opportunity to experience the same sense of awe and mystery that has drawn seekers to this desert for over 2,000 years.
The stars emerge one final time as I prepare to leave this sacred desert, their ancient light casting silver shadows across the lines that have become part of my soul. In these last hours before dawn, the boundaries between past and present dissolve completely, and I find myself existing in a timeless moment where the voices of the Nazca creators seem to whisper directly into my consciousness. The desert holds its breath, as if aware that another chapter in the endless story of human wonder is drawing to a close. I walk slowly along the great spider one last time, my footsteps creating a rhythm that seems to echo the heartbeat of the earth itself. Each step carries the weight of all I have learned and all that remains forever unknowable about this place. The spider's legs extend into the darkness like pathways to infinity, reminding me that some journeys have no destination except the traveling itself, no purpose except the transformation that occurs along the way. The wind carries scents of distant places, salt from the ocean, snow from mountain peaks,
flowers from hidden valleys where life persists against all odds. These fragrances remind me that the Nazca lines exist not in isolation, but as part of a vast web of connections that link all places and all times in patterns too complex for human understanding. The desert is not empty, but full, pregnant with meanings that reveal themselves only to those who learn to listen with more than their ears. As I sit in meditation at the center of the hummingbird geoglyph, I feel the presence of all who have come before me, the original creators who moved stones with reverent hands, the pilgrims who walked these paths in search of divine connection, the researchers who dedicated their lives to understanding these mysteries, the guardians who protect them still. We are all part of a single continuous story that began in the distant past and will continue long after our individual chapters have ended. The mathematical precision of the lines speaks to something beyond mere human planning, a form of knowledge that emerges from deep communion with natural forces and cosmic rhythms. The Nazca people achieved a synthesis of art and science, spirituality and practicality that challenges our modern assumptions about the separation between different forms of understanding. They created something that exists simultaneously in the realms of matter and spirit, time and eternity. The silence here is not empty, but full of potential, like the pause between musical notes that gives meaning to the melody. In this profound quietude, I understand that the Nazca lines function as a form of prayer that requires no words, a conversation with the infinite that transcends the limitations of language and logic. They exist in the space between question and answer, between human longing and divine mystery.
The approaching dawn brings subtle changes to the quality of light and shadow, revealing new aspects of the patterns that surround me. What appeared static in the darkness begins to show signs of movement and life, as if the lines themselves are breathing with the rhythm of the awakening earth. This daily transformation reminds me that mystery is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced, not a puzzle with missing pieces, but a wholeness that encompasses all contradictions. I think of the artificial intelligence that has recently revealed hundreds of new geoglyphs, and I wonder what the ancient creators would make of machines that can see patterns invisible to human eyes. Perhaps they would recognize in our technology a reflection of their own ability to perceive connections and relationships that transcend ordinary perception. The tools change, but the fundamental human drive to understand and create meaning remains constant across the centuries. The preservation challenges facing the lines mirror the broader human struggle to maintain connection with sources of meaning and transcendence in an increasingly complex world. Climate change, development pressure, and cultural erosion threaten not just the physical survival of the geoglyphs, but the spiritual understanding that gave them birth. Protecting the lines means protecting our capacity for wonder, our willingness to invest effort in purposes that transcend immediate practical needs. The tourist infrastructure that has grown around the lines represents both opportunity and challenge. The chance to share these marvels with the world, balanced against the risk of transforming sacred space into commercial spectacle. Each visitor brings their own questions and interpretations, adding new layers to the accumulated meaning of the site, while potentially diluting its essential character. The challenge lies in maintaining reverence while encouraging exploration. As the first light of dawn touches the eastern horizon,
The lines begin their daily emergence from darkness into visibility. This transformation happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, like the slow revelation of truth that comes through patient contemplation. The geoglyphs teach us that some forms of understanding cannot be rushed or forced, but must be allowed to unfold in their own time and according to their own logic. The legacy of the Nazca lines extends far beyond their immediate archaeological significance to encompass fundamental questions about human nature and potential. They remind us that our ancestors possessed forms of knowledge and capability that we are only beginning to appreciate, that progress is not always linear, and that wisdom sometimes requires looking backward as well as forward. They challenge us to expand our definitions of achievement and success beyond purely material measures.
The global fascination with the lines reflects a deep human hunger for mystery and meaning that persists despite all our technological advances. In an age when information is instantly available and every question seems answerable through internet searches, the Nazca lines stand as monuments to the unknowable, reminders that the most important aspects of existence often lie beyond the reach of rational analysis. As I prepared to leave this sacred place, I carry with me not answers, but better questions, not solutions, but deeper appreciation for the complexity and beauty of human aspiration. The lines have taught me that mystery is not the enemy of understanding, but its most profound expression, that wonder is not a childish emotion to be outgrown, but a mature response to the infinite complexity of existence. The desert wind picks up as dawn approaches, carrying my footprints away and erasing all traces of my presence. Soon the lines will appear exactly as they did before I arrived, unchanged by my passage, yet somehow different because they have been witnessed once again with reverence and attention. In this erasure, I find a final lesson about the relationship between permanence and impermanence, between the eternal patterns that endure and the temporary consciousness that perceives them.
The sun rises fully now, painting the ancient lines in shades of gold and amber that seem to pulse with their own inner light. I take my final steps across this sacred landscape, feeling the weight of accumulated mystery settling into my bones like desert sand. The great geoglyphs fade gradually into the uniform brightness of day, becoming invisible once more to ground-level observers, yet their presence remains imprinted on my consciousness like after-images of divine fire. The wind carries whispers of all the stories I have witnessed here, tales of ancient astronomers mapping celestial movements in stone and sand, of pilgrims walking sacred pathways in search of water and transcendence, of artists creating beauty that could only be appreciated by gods and birds. These voices blend together into a single eternal song that speaks of humanity's endless quest to find meaning in the vast emptiness of existence. As I walk away from the lines, I understand that I am not leaving them behind, but carrying them forward, becoming part of the endless chain of witnesses who have stood in wonder before these ancient creations. The mystery travels with me now, woven into the fabric of my being like threads of starlight in the darkness of ordinary consciousness. The desert holds its secrets close, revealing them only to those who approach with patience and reverence. In the growing heat of the morning sun, the lines shimmer and dance like mirages, reminding me that the boundary between reality and vision is thinner than we imagine,
that truth often appears in forms that challenge our conventional understanding of what is possible. The Nazca people created something that transcends time and space, something that speaks directly to the eternal aspects of human nature that remain unchanged despite all our technological progress. Their lines continue to draw seekers from around the world, each one adding their own questions and interpretations to the accumulated meaning of this sacred place. Good night, time traveler. May your dreams carry echoes of the voices we have borrowed today, and may tomorrow find you rested in the gentle footprints we have left in the infinite sand of history.